All right, guys, we ready to kick this off? Take that as a yes. Get the live stream loaded. Okay, looks like we are live. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to IoT Happy Hour, our new weekly chat where we're hanging out and discussing all things IoT, making, robotics, home hacking, etc. I'm David. I'm a developer advocate at Balena. I'm joined this week by, let's see who we've got. I see Chris, I see John, I see Andrew, I see Phil, I see James. That's good. We're going to be talking to him later. I see Anuj is on the line. Alan, John, did I miss anybody? No, I think that's everyone. So as usual, I'm going to go over a couple of quick news items that the community should probably be aware of. Then we'll move on to the fun part of the show. This week, James is going to show off this super creepy robot hexapod. It creeps me out every time I look at it. I don't know why it is, but
I don't understand. It's not that creepy.
It is. It is absolutely creepy to me. I'm not sure what it is.
Is it because you live in Arizona and they're giant
you know
bugs
what?
there?
Yeah, it's because of I'm just scared of spiders, I guess. I don't know.
You need to buck up, man. That robot is the future.
So it'll be delivering your masks before you know it.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
So I don't know, James, if you're planning on a demo of this thing or not, but we'll check out, how far along in the build you are. It's going to be awesome to see this thing in action. So before I get going, any quick housekeeping questions from anyone on the panel?
I just have a question that should probably be answered by everyone at the end of the stream. But what sci-fi movie or comic or book does this remind you of after looking at the stream?
All right, so we'll revisit
everyone
that
has
one.
to come up with something.
That's a good one.
I think I've already got my answer, and I think I know why. But okay.
Anyone in the comments, just chip in as you watch it as well.
All right, perfect. So I think then with that said, let me pull up the news items that caught my eye this week. So the first one I noticed is that if anyone remembers the Amazon Dash button, it was a little device that was productized and branded that you would tie to your Amazon account, and you would simply press the button and it would reorder whatever item it was. I remember there being like laundry detergent.
Alan's got one. Check that out.
Alan's got one?
Wait, Alan, I'm confused. What does that button order?
Is that trash bags?
This is a Amazon Dash trash bag ordering button that, of course, went dead a couple of months ago. But I used it successfully, and it was actually pretty nice.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. Amazon discontinued those devices. Now, I don't know if they hardware bricked them or just stopped fulfilling orders and you could mash the button all day long or not. But Seed Studio has now recreated a version of it. So if you go on the Seed Studio website, you can see that they now have an Amazon Dash button. Okay. Question for the audience or anyone on the panel. I remember that those old ones were somewhat hackable in that you could, I guess probably with a serial console, alter the firmware that was on them in order to change the object that was actually ordered. So I have to suspect that this new one, especially if it's coming out from Seed Studio, must have some capability to define what it is that you're ordering. Or can the button actually be triggered to perform some other action? Could you start and stop an AWS server with the button? I don't know. So going to require a little bit of investigation, but thought it was a pretty neat find.
So as far as I remember, the older dash button, they were the ones that were tied to brands, and there were ones that you could buy for development kind of purposes. And then it would sync up with their AWS IoT service, and it would trigger an event there, and then you can use that event to like basically do anything in AWS, including call some other service. So there were like developer buttons, and then there were like buttons for Tide and whatever.
I did not realize that there were developer buttons available as well.
Yeah.
I never caught that. Okay.
So the seed one looks like you can configure it for different types of button clicks. So a long hold and short button click. So it looks completely configurable to do whatever you want.
Oh, pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
And then, so in the Seed Studio version, it's not only allowing you to make purchases of items, correct? It's allowing you to do other functionality as well then?
Well, I've just scan read the thing, but yeah, I mean, since it's from Seed, it will almost certainly be, which is really cool because it can open up tons of things, home automation.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah, but
so we could just press a button and blink Alan's light remotely without having to actually use a web interface, then, is what I'm kind of getting at here.
That means I don't need to log on to annoy Alan. I can do that at any time of the day.
We're going to have to remind viewers of what that light and that buzzer is. Alan, a quick little plug. That's a pretty cool
Alan
project.
covered.
Yeah, sure. It's the LED alerter. It's basically a web-controlled LED light system to alert people. Thank you, whoever hit that.
Buzzing in real time.
Yeah, it has, you can create a public URL for it easily. And therefore, anybody in the world who has the URL could conceivably change the status, but it's basically designed for work at home to let people around you know when you're not to be disturbed.
Someone just put the link in chat there as well.
Yeah, that was me.
Here we go again.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, please feel free to change the status.
Or the... Oh, yeah, there we go.
It's like someone did that.
Nice.
Thank you, whoever did that.
Oh,
if you're interested in trying out that project, we're actually going to wrap the guide today, I believe, right, Alan?
That's correct. Yeah.
Cool. Y'all can check it out. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So the second interesting news item I found this week was from a company by the name of MatchX. Their initial products were LoRa gateways and LoRa receivers. And they've got a new product out that is a development kit that combines a dual-core RISC-V processor, an NPU, which is a neural network accelerator, and a LoRaWAN radio all in one. So it's a little dev board, probably a little bit smaller than a Raspberry Pi, but it's an interesting mix of hardware. Now, at the moment, a RISC-V processor is not actually supported on Balena Cloud, but perhaps down the road it's something we could take a look at. I know that RISC-V is gaining some traction in the industry, but the more important piece here is that LoRaWAN radio, which are good depending on environmental conditions, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 miles. Chris, I know you've done some experimentation with LoRaWAN. Did you test the range?
Chris did some enormous antenna project, didn't he?
Yeah.
I've got a gateway with an enormous antenna, but I don't actually have any nodes right now.
Okay,
so I haven't tested the range just yet. But it's like where I live is in a valley, so it's like my gateway is quite limited geographically. Okay. But I know some people have got hundreds of kilometers, haven't they?
Yeah, it definitely depends on antenna strength, antenna positioning, environmental conditions, but you can achieve some pretty good rates. Now, with that said, it is definitely a low speed of transmission, so you're not going to be broadcasting, live video streams over it, but it is good for IoT projects that are sensor data like temperature, humidity, or just simply telemetry coming off of a device.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, if there's any,
some of the projects people have done bouncing it off the troposphere, they can go hundreds of miles on LoRaWAN just by bouncing it off of the part of the atmosphere.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's incredible. I was not aware of that. So, Chris, you're in the UK. I know we've got some folks in London. I'd have to be curious then if anyone is able to actually reach that gateway. But to any audience members, any viewers out there, might be worth trying.
I would say that's not going to happen.
No,
there's too many hills near me. Yeah, I would have to put it up a lot higher for mine.
I see Rich is on the stream. He's up north. Matthew, you're up in Liverpool. We'll have to see how far we can reach. All right.
I mean, I'd be impressed. By all means, give it a shot.
Put it on a bigger antenna pole. I mean, Chris, you're gonna have to get a longer stick to put it on.
What are you listening for, Chris?
I'm not sure yet.
I mean, if you can just ask me for my Spotify login, I'll let you borrow it. If you're that hard up.
I see Matthew in the comments.
Anytime.
It's super cool for, like, I was thinking of using it for putting temperature sensors around, because just even in my area, I can get a few sensors out there. And Pi Supply have got some really cool hats for like Raspberry Pi and Microbit and Arduino and stuff like that.
All right, cool. Well, just in the interest of time, let's move on to this last one. I noticed, of course, more and more people wearing Apple watches and Samsung Galaxy watches, and I've got an old-fashioned watch, and I thought, maybe I need to get a smartwatch. So it turns out there's a little development board kit that has an ESP32 on it, and you can sort of build your own smartwatch. The name of it is a little odd. It's DSTIKE. Is that a D-Stike or DS-Tike? I'm not entirely sure, but essentially it's a smartwatch development kit, and it comes with a TFT or OLED display. And looking at the pictures of it online, I thought, this definitely looks like something that Chris would wear. So for anyone out there that's looking to, build your own smartwatch, there's apparently some kits available now.
There's also so if you know about Pine 64, which is like a very nice, powerful ARM board. So those guys have come up with Pine Time, if I remember the name correctly, which has a Nordic chipset instead of an Espressy one, which is BLE only, if I remember correctly. I think it's BLE and 802.15.4. So, and it's still a developer board-ish thing right now.
Ah, interesting.
So I think like there's a void that's left by Pebble for something which is, developer friendly.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
And works with both Android and iOS.
I had seen the name Pine Time. I had not associated the two of them. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll have to go check that out. I'll take a look at it. I see that the link to the dev kit is in the YouTube chat, so anybody can go check that out. It's pretty neat.
That
was it for. Yeah, go ahead.
Forget like pragmatic smartwatch functionality. I just want a web interface button so I can buzz Alan whenever I want.
That is a great use case.
That'd be the alpha use case for me.
I totally encourage that.
I mean, that put me over the
and they change the color.
I was in two minds about getting one, but now I'm sold.
Yeah. We're going to see Chris wearing it next week. I can already envision it. All right. Well, I think that's it from interesting tidbits that I noticed over the week. I am really excited to move on to the super creepy robot Hexapod portion of the show. So, James.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate
adjusting the lighting. I should warn the viewers that it is 5 a.m. in New Zealand. Welcome to the dark side of the world.
I was just going to say thank you for waking up super early to join us. Really appreciate it.
It's totally fine. I'm just more worried about the video and the lighting, but we'll make do.
No, it looks good. So,
Right.
James, if you want to give a quick introduction of who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm James Harton. I'm a back-end developer at Balena, and I normally, like for a job, don't make robots, but it seems that it's just something that comes naturally. I've made a few now. I started working on this particular project probably 3 or 4 years ago, but I found myself idle for a few months with a bit of cash in my pocket, and so it's finally come to fruition. Yeah, so that's me.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. So I guess the very first question I have for you is, who is Augie? And quite honestly, is he friendly? Is he friend or foe?
At the moment, he's idle, so it's yet to be seen. So Augie is the name that, because I started working on, here we go. This is version 1 of Augie. This is a design I found on Thingiverse for 9-gram servos.
Wow.
That I 3D printed. The Wellington National Library used to have 3D printing services that was $1 an hour, obviously well below cost. So I got them to 3D print this. I was never really very satisfied with it. There's so much play in the servos, and it's very hard to make any kind of repeatable anything that made any sense. But anyway, my partner's child said to me, why are you building a robot? No, I don't know, it's because it's there. Does it have a name? No. Well, it's called Augie then. Okay.
All
it's
right.
called Augie.
So all right, so she named him. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where the name came from.
Okay.
Yeah. But yes, I don't know if it's evil yet, or evil. It may be evil in that it's a massive drain on my productivity, wallet, and time.
James, question from the audience: how many servos did it take to make that?
So this has got 6 legs with 3 servos each. So if you do the maths, that is 18.
Good maths.
Yeah, I presume that's right.
It's nothing like live maths.
Yeah, someone double check my numbers quick.
Hey James, we'll share the Hackster article about Augie in the chat too. So
yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah,
take a deeper look on their own time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good idea. Great call on that. So that's the prototype there. So can you kind of tell me a little bit about the build process, or how do you go about from creation, or I guess ideation, creation, and kind of getting the pieces, fitting them together, and what sort of control mechanisms there are?
Yeah, so I guess a bit of my backstory is that I used to work for oshpark.com, who make printed circuit boards. So I've kind of been associated with the maker industry for a number of years, and I wasn't getting to make anything in my last couple of jobs. So the ideation was basically around, like, what can I do with these cool little Raspberry Pis? I remember the first time I got my hands on a Pi Zero, which I know that from a balena production standpoint is definitely a no-go, but for making little hacky projects, they are fantastic little boards. And I got my hands on one, and I was like, what can I make with this? And then I was like, well, I could always make that robot I wanted to make. So that's where the idea came from. But it has been definitely a learning experience, because although I had a limited amount of experience with designing PCBs and a limited amount of experience with working CAD software, getting to the point where I could actually build this huge robot, which I'll show you soon, took a really long time, really long time. And I'm still iterating on I'm not certain entirely on the software. I'm not certain entirely on the hardware. So all I know is that I've got a big hunk of plastic and servos that that part's probably not going to change.
Okay, so let me see here. If I understand this correctly, then you're holding, a small version in your hand there, but that Hackster article has a picture of something
very
much
large one,
bigger. And I see that Matthew, and thank you, Matthew, for joining, by the way, from the audience, is asking that it can be scaled to any size. So now, wait a minute. How large can this thing actually get?
The hardest part is finding servos. But I remember after looking at this, I was looking at some hobbies at building the small one. I was looking at some hobby servos on Hobby King, and I was like, oh, they have 10 kg of torque. That's a lot of torque. That sounds a lot of fun. And then I had this vision of riding one around. Pop into my head. I was like, oh man, imagine if you made one that you could stand on and ride around, and instead of those electric scooters that everyone's riding these days, you could use that to commute to work. How cool would that be?
I think you just answered Rich's question on the chat. Why are you building a robot? To ride, Rich. To ride.
There you go. Eventually I want to build one I can stand on and ride around. Yes.
Okay. Wait a minute. I'm changing my answer to. At the top of the show, Anuj asked a question about what movie, but does this associate with? I've now changed my answer. Okay.
Let's ask it again though to the folks who've joined the stream, because I'm curious to see what folks' answers are after the interview.
Yeah, now that we've got some people viewing, Anuj, you want to ask it again? Did we lose him? Oh, he's on mute. It's okay. Well, he had asked a question regarding what movie
or video game,
or video game, would be good.
Yeah.
Does this project seem to connotate or associate in your mind with? And I'm now changing my answer.
Well, if you look at the Hexter article, I've already made my pick. I made it way back in the beginning, but I don't know. So there's a rather large robot here that I want to introduce to you. It's sitting on my workbench over here. I'm just going to improve the lighting, and I'm actually just going to pick up and move my camera. And I know that's really bad YouTube etiquette, but that's just how it's going to go.
Go for it.
Yeah,
so
let's do this.
I'm going to try and light.
Oh my gosh!
How am I going to do that? Okay, it's stuck on my monitor. All right, can I put it?
Oh boy.
Uh-oh.
Hey Chris, this is where we need that like standby for technical difficulties.
Okay, so that's on a terrible angle, but
screen.
It's sitting on top of my monitor. I'm really sorry about that. It's like balanced on the edge of one of my monitors.
Oh, there we go.
But
yeah, that looks good.
Can you see that clearly? So there's my hand for scale. I can fit my whole head in underneath, no trouble. For scale.
You just changed everyone's movie answer, by the way, after you put your head underneath the killer robot frame.
So as you can see, I've got a Raspberry Pi Zero here. I've got this is actually kind of the wire's a bit tight, so I won't turn it around. But this is I've got a cheap GPS module from a drone. There's drone parts are so cheap. There's an awesome way to get hold of cool tech. I'll show you more about the circuit board in a minute, because I've got another copy of it on my desk, but it has a Teensy on it and a couple of sensors. These servos, this one has, if you do the maths, 19 servos. It has an additional one here so that the front to basically the head of the robot can move up and down. So the idea is that, hang on, hopefully it won't, it's just held there by torque or by, so hopefully I'll be able to pick things up. But also,
wow,
I like the idea of a bit of a dab. You know, maybe a bit of a dab. Walk into a room, dab at you, leave again.
Looks like a crab.
Thing. So there we go.
Sebastian.
I now reiterate.
Little Mermaid.
I now reiterate why I believe this thing is a little bit creepy.
So these servos, so I was telling the story of how I found some 10 kg servos, and I was like, I wonder how big I can go. And in New Zealand, we have, at least until global pandemics, we have this amazing free trade agreement with China that makes ordering stuff from AliExpress fantastic. So I was looking on AliExpress and I found these 60 kg centimeter servos. Now I don't know what that is in pounds and feet. I'm sorry, someone will have to do the maths for me. But they are insanely powerful. Unfortunately, part of being insanely powerful is that their store current is 5 amps each, and the very first thing I did after getting the servo driver working was crash 2 legs together and blow up my power supply because because I was drawing 10 amps. So there we go. That's the robot. Now I'm going to move the camera back to its normal position. I will pick it up in a minute, but I haven't. I want to show some software. Can I share my screen with this?
Of course you can.
You should be able to.
Click this little button. I want to share this.
We have a question while you get your software settled. Can the robot do the YMCA, I'm assuming, dance?
Eventually, it will be able to, yes.
Nice.
Hello there. Can you see my camera stream from the Pi Zero?
Yep.
So I'm reading I have the Teensy reading all the sensors at a reasonably high frequency and emitting them over the USB serial connection as telemetry, and then I have an Alexa app that is rendering these rather not very good graphs at the moment, so I can sort of see. Now you all know where I live, by the way, so thanks. But and my altitude, but yeah, you can see the output of the gyro, the orientation. So the sensors on this little guy here, maybe I'll show it here. I have I'm using Adafruit breakout boards. I'm going to turn this screen sharing back off. Stop share. Because I want you to be able to see this camera. This is the main board here. This is missing one sensor, the power sensor. Is that in focus? Hard to tell.
It's a little out of focus, but we get the idea. It's close, yeah.
Yeah. So we have one Teensy 4.0 Osh Park edition in beautiful purple. We have a BNO 055 sensor. This sensor is fantastic because you can read the raw data from the various sensors, but it also has onboard fusion. So it does the sensor fusion for you and gives you an output orientation as a quaternion that is very, very reliable because you don't have to do the maths yourself. It has a little wee ARM core on it, which is kind of amazing. And then we have these little guys, which are also Adafruit. They are PCA 9685, basically PWM drivers, but they come set up specifically for helping you drive lots of RC servos. So that is the main control of this system. It also, they're out of stock at my local supplier, and Adafruit are not shipping anything anywhere, so I haven't got enough power sensors at the moment, but it has an INA 219 sensor, which I use to monitor the battery because it's powered by a lithium polymer, like 6-cell RC from this thing up here. RC
Got a question for you from the chat. Well, first off, we also have some props that the Augie web interface is nice. So good job there.
Yeah.
The question is, what kind of sensor is that? A BNO?
Yeah, it's a BNO 055. The breakout board from Adafruit.
And if we're going back chat log a bit further, Rich wants to know how big is big? Like, is there too big so that Augie can scale to?
I didn't want to unplug it because I wanted the software to actually work, and it's a little temperamental at the moment. I spent some time last night making sure that it was all running before going to bed to get up to do this, but I'm going to unplug it and pick it up so you can get a sense of it a bit better.
Right on. There's a follow-up question as well to the sensor one. What does the sensor actually do?
Okay. So now it's sitting.
Yeah. How much does that weigh?
It weighs about, well, my my kitchen scales only go up to 5 kilos, and it just says too heavy. So that's all I know. It's more than 5 kilos.
Wow.
It is pretty heavy. I think about 6.5, 7 kgs.
Wow.
How big is big? I think it could definitely go bigger. These servos definitely have the torque to go bigger. Main problem is that my laser cutter that I use to build all these black acrylic parts you can see is only 10 watts. So I can't cut anything much stronger than that.
Well, you're going to need a bigger one if you're going to fulfill, someone had mentioned maybe Augie's the next gen rideshare platform. You're definitely not
well, exactly. I'm going to disrupt the
bigger.
electric scooter market with them.
Well, I have to wonder if anyone watching has a larger laser.
Help out.
We could get some community assistance here.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely been looking at the K40 Chinese lasers, the CO2 lasers, 40 watt. But then, the next step for this, once I actually get the software going, is I would like to recut all the there goes the battery. Recut all the plastic parts in aluminium, which I will definitely not be able to do even with a 40 watt.
Oh, so you're going to armor
laser.
It now.
Oh,
well, I just want to make it strong enough that if I did stand on it, the plastic wouldn't snap. Because at the moment, it's much more rigid than it was, but there is still, I don't know if you can see, there's still a little bit of
so rigidity and not combat readiness.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing I'm mostly worried about. So yeah, bit of a different view. Has a big hole here in the back, which is where a rather large RC battery. I don't know how long I'm going to get out of it, but I think it'll be a long time. And additionally, crikey, this thing is heavy.
I was just about to say, while you're struggling with that, I happen to know one of our audience members, Matthew from the Makerspace up in Liverpool, is a participant in the IoT Liverpool meetup. I see his comment in there. Thanks, Matthew. He's got a 70-watt laser, and I think he's also got some folks that do some machining. I remember, Matthew, you had built a buoy project that had some custom aluminum work as well. So I have a feeling, James, we might be able to get you the parts you need.
Yeah, it's a surprising number of parts when it all goes together. But yeah, I was going to point out there's also a rather large cavity inside the head here, which is where this Raspberry Pi with its little camera and stuff will 3D print and mount and put it in there.
Cool.
So yeah, I'm going to put this thing down now.
We had a follow-up question to the sensors as well, James. What does the sensor actually do?
Okay, so the main sensor that I'm using is that B&O 055, and it is a combination. It's actually probably something that like what's in your phone or your Wii controller or any of those other controllers. There we go, put that back on the bench. And that it is a combination of an accelerometer, a magnetometer, a gyroscope, and no, that's it. Those are the three. It's 9 degrees of freedom. So the accelerometer tells the device how much it's accelerating in any direction. The magnetometer gives you a gravity vector, which means no, that's the accelerometer as well, gives you a gravity vector. The magnetometer tells you where north is magnetically, and the gyroscope gives you angular acceleration, so not linear acceleration in a direction, but when you're twisting around. And by fusing all those sensors together in software, you can get what's called an absolute orientation, which is output, or you will have noticed in maybe I'll take a screenshot of this and share it again, but you'll have noticed that the accelerometer, magnetometer, gyroscope, gravity, and linear acceleration all have output in XYZ, which is what's known as Euler angles, or Euler. Don't want to disrespect my maths friends. But the orientation it says X, Y, Z, and W, and those it's a unit called quaternions, which is used to describe an absolute orientation, which is direction in space. So with that sensor, I can tell, and the sensor's mounted on the on this little board, which is actually going to sit. It's designed to fit inside the cavity, just in front of the battery. And which is very near the center of the device. So it should be able to tell me exactly the orientation, at least of the main portion of the body. And that will help me. I would like to run some control loops, PID control loops, so that for example, when I command it to put down the leg onto a surface, if the surface is higher than expected, that would cause some roll. And then the PID can go, oh, actually, I must be walking over an uneven surface and level it out again. That sort of thing. So that's what that sensor does.
Yep. James, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How come you went for 6 legs rather than 8 or 10, or why did you
took my
6?
question? I was going to ask that.
Well, that's a hard question. 4 legs, and you're trying to be cute, right? Like you're basically making a robot dog or whatever, and it's cutesy. And everyone's seen that now. Everyone's seen Adam Savage in a tuk-tuk being pulled along by a Boston Dynamics robot. But 6 legs, yeah, I guess you're right, David. It does look a bit creepier. But 8 legs or 10 legs, like each one of those servos cost about 60 New Zealand dollars. So we're talking about all up. I think the servos were about $850 New Zealand. So we're talking about a major investment, and every leg that gets added is, another massive amount of cash. So basically, that's why I chose 6 legs. It's like 4 legs, no. 8 legs, too expensive. But also, I think there's also a mechanical issue with when you add too many legs, you're going to have, the more legs you have, the more chance you're going to have of crashing them together, of collisions. And I haven't figured out, this is not my area of expertise, and I haven't simulated the robot yet or anything and worked on that sort of stuff.
Well, you've gotten pretty far, man.
Yeah, it looks pretty far. So you just touched on cost there for a moment. That was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about. So what would I know that it's scalable, as you've kind of mentioned, size-wise. What's the total cost, I'd say, for that large one that you already have? But then alternatively, what would be the cost of building a smaller variant if people at home wanted to try this out?
You could start with like the little version 1 that I showed. You can download the files that's small enough to 3D print and get a reasonable, reasonable output. So that's probably going to cost you, well, if you used a commercial 3D printing service like 3D Hubs or something like that, it'd be probably quite expensive. But these servos are $3 each, so you can do the maths. 3 times 18. The electronics, I mean, you're going to spend maybe a couple $100, but that really depends on what you want to do. Like this one has a different controller unit. This has this is from Pololu. It is called a Mini Maestro 24, and it's a great little micro that has a GUI that you plug it in via USB, and you program it with a GUI, and you basically say, here are the preset positions, here's the acceleration I want, and here are some poses, and you can teach it sequences. So you don't even need a Raspberry Pi or anything else, or even you don't even really need to write software to like, if you just want to get like it can walk and things like that. So you can go quite cheap. In terms of building Augie, I hate to think.
Oh man!
I mean, there's hundreds of hours of 3D printing, so you need to buy a 3D printer. There is a substantial amount of laser cutting, which means you're paying for materials. Probably use like 4 40 by 60 centimeter sheets of acrylic at they're about $30 each, so that's not a huge cost. I mean, it depends relatively. one of the more expensive and hard to find things was lots and lots of screws. I don't know if you noticed, but there is a ton of screws on this. Each servo has 16 screws just in the connection at the hinge, because they're only M2 by 6 or M2.5 by 6. So you need a lot of them to make sure you're spreading any load across the joints.
Just remember, mate, that this is being recorded on YouTube in case anybody in your house shouldn't know how much you've spent on this.
In case there's a partner that you don't want to know.
No,
I think it was like super cheap, wasn't it?
No, she knows.
Yeah, it was really cheap.
Like $20.
Yeah, no, she knows. She might not. She might not understand, but she knows.
Hey, James.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans for adding like audio out?
Yeah, well, that's one of I've got the Raspberry Pi on there. I haven't really done anything with it yet, other than build the GUI for it. But for sure, yeah, it would be nice and easy to add some audio, add a speaker to it, or a buzzer, or anything like that. Add some LEDs like Alan's got. So
if that project taught us anything, it's definitely share the public URL for that and let people control your stuff in your house.
Yeah. Let them control a 6-legged killer robot in your home.
So that wouldn't increase the creep factor at all.
It's definitely something I'm looking at. One of my other projects for Balena is a balance bot that I definitely plan to make internet controllable. So, yeah.
Well, we'll have to visit that one in a future episode.
Yeah, if I ever finish
it. Matthew in the chat was saying that with WebRTC, if you put a screen on it, you could have like a telepresence Augie, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
that would be pretty cool. I have actually got one of those little 2.8-inch TFT Raspberry Pi hats, so that could be a fun addition.
I have a feeling though, if you've got a giant spider robot coming towards you with a head on it on a screen, people probably aren't going to stand around and chat.
And be like,
grandma's on
hey
it.
guys, like, why are you running away? Why are you running away from me?
Well, I asked in the beginning, friend or foe? So you mentioned it's got a Raspberry Pi on it then. So at least for this larger one, I noticed the smaller one did not have a Pi. It had just a microcontroller. Now in this one here, so can it be remotely deployed via Balena Cloud then? Or is that?
Yep, it can. I'm using so I've got a Balena Cloud application that I mean, obviously it's under heavy development. It was certainly was last night, making sure it worked again. But I'm using Platform IO, which is a great software IDE that basically plugs into any editor. So I'm using it in Visual Studio Code for the firmware for the Teensy. And I've figured out how to manage that, to get that to build my firmware on the build server and then run the Teensy CLI once it's deployed, to deploy it to reflash the Teensy every time I do a deploy, which is a great way to make sure I can do remote firmware updates, which is probably one of the harder parts to get working. And I have an Alexa Phoenix app, which I use for the web interface, which is, I mean, it's really no different to deploying it to Heroku or any other like container-based service.
Awesome. Well, all right. I think with that said, let's do a quick call out to the audience. Does anyone out there have any questions? I want to take a quick pause. I know that the YouTube stream lags by about 10 or 20 seconds. So let's give a quick break, see if any questions come in from the audience. While that's going on, if anyone wants to ring Alan's buzzer, I think this would be a good time to do that.
I want to hear what movie, video game, or piece of pop culture this reminds people of, now that we've got the full story.
I'll go first on that one, but let me see. Did we get any questions come in? Let's take a look. Matthew says tell a horror. No, it doesn't look like we had any roll in. Well, so at the start of the stream, I initially thought, by all means, arachnophobia. But after...
I'm glad that's back.
Thank you to whoever did that. I'm now thinking more. I can't recall the name of it. I want to say it was a Tom Cruise. It was Attack of the Martians or something like that. And the
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. That's what it was. The poster artwork were those.
Film. Does anybody remember there was terrible. A film Wild Wild West that had Will Smith in it? And it had spider
catchy
tanks.
Song. Yeah.
But do you remember the spider tanks?
Yes.
That's what it reminds me of.
Okay, so
nice. Good one, man.
Yeah. I was going to say Toy Story. It's that like evil robot thing with the doll head that Sid has got next door in Toy Story.
Oh, wow.
I should definitely stick a doll head on it. That would increase
like
the
one where all the hair's been ripped out. Yeah.
I have a weird like esoteric reference, or maybe I don't know, it's pretty mainstream. In the game League of Legends, there's a champion called Urgot, and he's got like a bunch of legs like that, but he's like, there's a human torso on the top, and I couldn't help but think of Urgot. Nice. Yeah, he's pretty creepy looking. Or the super throwback, you remember StarCraft? You get the dragons. They have a bunch of legs. It looks like that also. No, complete, just whoop.
What's he talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. I know StarCraft, but I don't remember any of the characters or guys or anything. All right, well, we got. Oh wait, Alan.
Arrival.
Ooh.
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking of when James was talking about standing on it. Thank you for that. I think I should get a beep whenever I start speaking.
You brought this on yourself. You deserve all of this.
No, Chris brought it on him, actually.
No, but when James was talking about standing on it, I was thinking of, I guess it's Ripley in Aliens, where she is inside that.
The power loader.
Like, yeah. So I was picturing James just standing on it and just walking around like that. And
if you want to see someone actually building a power loader, there's a YouTube channel called Hacksmith, and they've been building a power loader for several years, and it is incredible and difficult.
Yeah, I would think so. One other quick reference. This is a little off the track, but at the beginning of, or somewhere in the beginning of Jaws, they show a dead body with the crabs crawling over it. And it reminded me of the of the hexapod. Yeah. I know it's a little gross, but that's what came to mind. Sorry.
Definitely have to figure out that sideways walking algorithm. Definitely. Maybe some pincers.
Yeah, that's about the last thing that thing needs. Well,
so James, before we let you go, what's the next big milestone that you're going to want to focus on hitting?
Well, the next big milestone is the end of the coronavirus lockdown, so that I can get the parts I need to finish it, because the replacement power boards, the power regulators that I need are probably sitting on a dock in China waiting for some actual flights between China and New Zealand, which would be great. But I'm continuing to work on the software for it, and learning, like watching lots of YouTube channels about PID control and control loops and robot kinematics, and trying to rapidly learn how to make this work, but also do my job. So yeah.
Well, we look forward to seeing the next steps, and thanks for your time today, man. It's great to get to know Augie a little bit more.
Yeah.
Very Thank you for waking up early in New Zealand. Appreciate that.
That's my pleasure.
Yeah. I guess we'll have to have him back on a future episode once it's a bit further along in development. So, all right, I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up and wind it down. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for the questions coming in as well. Some really good stuff there. We're gonna be doing this weekly So for those of you who haven't liked or subscribed, now is the time to do it. And then, oh, you know what? Apologize. I see one last question just came in.
Do you post your files for Augie? So yes, I've got them all on GitLab. The main design files are in Fusion 360, but it's got a share function where you can download the project. So the software's there, the circuit board designs are there in KiCad. The 3D models are in STL files. There's DXFs for all the other parts. So it's all there. Plus with Fusion 360, it should be. I'm not the most expert, but it shouldn't be too hard to scale it up and down based on the sizes of your servos, as long as they're reasonably constant. Yeah.
We'll make sure to put the proper links in the show notes too, in the video description.
Yep.
Anyone wants to reference those, so.
All right. Well, I think that's about it then for this week. Next week, I am hoping to do a bit of a walkthrough. Something timely that I've been working on has been the Rosetta at Home project and fighting COVID-19 on single board computers. If I can get everything completed and wrapped up, I kind of want to do a little walkthrough on that. In conjunction with that, since I know a lot of us are working from home these days, Alan, I know that we've been terrorizing you with that do not disturb light behind you, but I was kind of thinking we could do a deeper dive into the actual build of that device as well. I know you've got a breadboard down at the bottom, and then is there perhaps a Raspberry Pi that's controlling it, or so we could go into the actual build steps of that as well. That's it from here. Any last questions or comments from the panel or audience? Otherwise, we can close it down.
Right on. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next
All right.
week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye.